We're breaking down safety prospects for the Buffalo Bills in the 2024 NFL Draft today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of Go Bills and Buffalo's Run, also the co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 if your bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Well, folks, welcome in. Very excited to talk NFL Draft, to talk safeties today on this episode. And as you know, we are creating the Buffalo Bills 2024 NFL Draft Board. And so far, we've done several wide receivers, defensive tackles, and defensive ends. And today will be our first batch of safeties. And we got a bunch more to come. We got to get into some offensive linemen. We have more receivers. We have more defensive tackles, more defensive ends, more safeties. We got to talk about some corners. There is plenty of work to be done on this class, and the draft is coming soon. We're in the month that the draft is, and so we will be ready for it by the end of the month. We're covering 5 safeties today, not all of them, just 5. These aren't necessarily my 5 highest graded safeties, just a batch of 5 safeties that could be on the Buffalo Bills' radar early in the draft, kind of the first 3-4 rounds, if you will. So we're going to cover on this episode Tyler Nubin out of Minnesota, Dadrion Taylor-Demerson out of Texas Tech, Javon Bullard out of Georgia, Jaden Hicks out of Washington State, and Cole Bishop out of Utah. In a future episode, we're definitely going to plan on getting to Kalen Bullock out of USC, Cameron Kitchens out of Miami, Ketan Oladapo out of Oregon State, Malik Mustafa out of Wake Forest, to name a few that are on my radar to cover in an upcoming episode. But today, those 5 that I already mentioned. And so let's start this conversation by assessing the need that exists for the Buffalo Bills at safety. Obviously, the Bills have transitioned away from Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde, 2 players that have meant a lot to the defense, meant a lot to the organization. The era is over. And currently, the Bills have Mike Edwards and Taylor Rapp as the scheduled starters. Taylor Rapp on the team last year. They signed him to a 3-year extension, so obviously they liked what they saw. And then Mike Edwards comes over from most recently the Kansas City Chiefs, and he's a player that I'm pretty excited about. Candidly, I'm more excited about Mike Edwards than I am Taylor Rapp. But Mike Edwards only a 1-year deal. Taylor Rapp, like I mentioned, a 3-year extension. But it's a deal that the Bills could very easily get out of after year 1. And so there's not a whole lot of long-term commitments here to this group. And then your depth players right now are Damar Hamlin and Cam Lewis. The Bills brought back Cam Lewis on a 2-year extension. Damar Hamlin's on the final year of his rookie contract. And for as much as Poyer and Hyde have meant to this football team and to this defense, over the last 2 seasons, the impact has been missing from those guys. Now, in 2022, that doesn't really extend to Jordan Poyer. He was awesome in 2022. But Micah Hyde got hurt very early in the season and missed the remainder of the year. You didn't have any impact out of Micah Hyde. In 2023, I think you saw both of those players take a step back. So for as much as we enjoyed that impact from Poyer and Hyde for a long period of time, collectively it's been missing over the last 2 seasons. And I think you really saw that in 2 different ways. The range, like their coverage range, wasn't what it typically is. And then as Sean McDermott dialed up more and more pressure looks, putting those guys in man coverage exposed some issues this past year. And so my focus as I've started scouting these safeties for this draft class for the Buffalo Bills is that I'm looking for, of course, instinctive players, but I want guys that are best in coverage. I want guys that I trust to play in deep zones. I want guys that I trust to play in man. That's what's most important to me as I assess these safeties for the Buffalo Bills. And so I think you'll see that show up in how I prefer and stack up these safeties. And maybe there's some guys that are some buzzy names that you might see draft people really like, but I'm lower on for the Buffalo Bills because I don't think that it's exactly the skill set that this team really kind of needs to build with moving forward. So with that out of the way, let's start talking about the prospects. And of course, we're going to ask ourselves two questions. Why should the Buffalo Bills consider drafting this player? And then what concerns exist about forecasting this player to the Buffalo Bills? And the first three guys that I'm going to talk about are pretty closely graded for me. They're all guys that I think are firm second-round picks. The other two are guys that are I'm a bit lower on, to be honest with you. But we'll start with the three that I really like. Tyler Nubin, safety from Minnesota, 6'1", 199 pounds, 32-inch arms, 9-inch hands. His RAS score is not very good, a 3.64 RAS score. And so that's definitely a disappointing component to the evaluation because he's a really good football player. But athletically, you just wish he offered more. Comes into the NFL with 13 career interceptions at Minnesota, 9 of those over the last 2 seasons. Also has 3 forced fumbles and 11 pass breakups on his resume. So why should the Buffalo Bills consider drafting Tyler Nubin out of Minnesota? This dude is an absolute ball hawk. He can drive on the football and break forward and make plays on the ball. He's great at taking good angles with his back to the ball and making plays. He rakes at the football when he has a chance to tackle. He plays through the hands. This guy has unmatched ability to make game-changing plays on the football of any safety that I've watched in this class to this point. I love that about him. You want to talk about a guy that can make game-changing plays in coverage. Tyler Nubin's that guy in this class for me. There's others that have really good ball skills. Tyler Nubin has the best. He's got good size and length, 6'1", 200 pounds, 32-inch arms. That's very strong. And I think he excels playing in deeper alignments with that upside to not only be a split zone safety playing deep, but if you want a one high center fielder from time to time, he can do it with his blend of ball skills and coverage instincts. I think he's a very strong processor that has a very good feel for what's unfolding in front of him and getting to where he needs to be. His zone spacing is outstanding, understands how to leverage routes, understands how to squeeze routes and pass them off. He's a very active communicator and leader in the secondary. And I think in some of the condensed areas of the field, you can ask him to play some man coverage against tight ends. So there's a lot to like. If you're looking for a guy that is a big-time impact player in coverage, Tyler Nubin's just outstanding. So what concerns are there about Tyler Nubin and projecting him to the Buffalo Bills? Well, first of all, he's got some athletic limitations. He's not going to win every foot race, and that impacts his ability to leverage the sideline in pursuit, right? He's not always going to be able to get there. He needs his instincts to be really sound to make up for a little bit of an athletic deficiency. I think his angles can be occasionally too aggressively calculated, where you see him, it looks like he's on path, but then he just overshoots it a little bit or undershoots it a little bit. I think he's generally a sound tackler, but he's not immune to an occasional whiff. And then that transitional quickness can be a little bit clunky, right? If he's asked to really drive and work laterally or drive and get at an angle, right? That transitional quickness is kind of missing something. But the coverage instincts, the plays on the ball, this guy has the goods. So I'm really high on Tyler Nubin firm second-round grade from me. All right, we're going to get into Javon Bullard out of Georgia, Dadrion Taylor-Demerson out of Texas Tech on the other side of it, so be sure to stick with me. The sports calendar is loaded, and FanDuel's making it even more exciting to get in on the action because right now new customers can get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 that you can use on betting for the college basketball tournament, Major League Baseball, NBA, NHL, and so much more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a big win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, folks, the next prospect I want to get into is Javon Bullard, safety out of Georgia, 5'10 and a half, 198 pounds, 30 3/4 inch arms, 9-inch hands, RAS score of an 8.2, so he's a good athlete. Last 2 years as a starter, 8 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks, 4 interceptions, 8 pass breakups, and a fumble recovery. Why should the Bills consider drafting Javon Bullard? Well, I really like the versatility that he's shown. In 2022, he was basically almost exclusively a slot corner for them. And then in 2023, he made the transition to being a deep safety. And I thought he looked great in both spots. And that lends itself to so much versatility. Obviously, as a slot corner, you're playing man. You're closer to the action. You can trigger. You have to fit the run. You blitz. As a deep safety, obviously you're playing in deeper alignments, coverage, more real estate that you have to deal with. And I think those things play hand in hand. I love safeties that have a background of playing another position in the secondary, whether that's in the slot or as an outside corner. I think that just really helps you. And Javon Bullard has that experience. I think he's a smart player with good field vision, timely responses, very instinctive, good feel for zone spacing and squeezing routes. I do think he's got a lot of upside to play man-to-man if you want that out of him. I think he's got good route anticipation skills. Georgia runs a pretty complex defense. I think there's a lot that they do structurally at Georgia that's going to set up particularly a back seven player to transition to the NFL. I think his ball skills look really good, has some very impressive moments breaking forward on the ball, can also play the ball down the field in the air. I think he's a fairly consistent tackler that's physical, takes good angles, brings his feet through contact. And I think his ability to play off contact is very appealing for me. You know, that's just part of the deal. You're pursuing the football. You got to be able to get your hands involved and play off guys. And I think he's got the goods to do that. So there's a lot to like about Javon Bullard. And one of the Bills' new coaches for their secondary was with him for a year at Georgia. So the Bills should have some pretty good intel on Javon Bullard. So what concerns are there about forecasting Javon Bullard, safety out of Georgia, to the Buffalo Bills? Well, I think he's got some tightness in his hips when transitioning. There's a reason he's moved from slot corner to safety. I think some of that transitional quickness is lacking a little bit. So I think some of those man-to-man matchups he might have some restrictions there where there's some matchups that you're not going to like, which is pretty typical with a safety. I love that he's also played both in the slot and as a deep safety, which I've already said. But the reality is he's not overly experienced in either role. I mean, literally just one season in the slot, one season as a deep safety. So I think there's some seasoning that's going to need to come with this player to get more reps and time on task to be able to play as comfortable and as fast as he can. And then I think it's fair to say that he's got only average recovery speed. I think he's a good overall athlete, but you know, if somebody gets a step on him, I wouldn't really anticipate him being able to make up that ground. So that's why I think some of the deficiencies are exactly why you saw him make that move to safety this past season for Georgia. But I think he's a firm second round grade. Right now, one of my top 3 safeties in this class to go with Tyler Nubin. And then also this next guy that I'm going to talk about. I'm a big fan of him. Dadrion Taylor-Demerson, safety out of Texas Tech, 5'10", 197 pounds, 30 7/8 on the arm length, 9 5/8 on the hand size, RAS score of an 8.76, so he's a very good athlete. In terms of production, 10 interceptions over the last 3 seasons. He was also a guy that played running back in high school and then made the transition to safety in college, so still relatively new for the position. So why should the Buffalo Bills consider drafting Dadrion Taylor-Demerson, the safety out of Texas Tech? I think 2 things really pop with him. He's instinctive and he's versatile. I think he might be the most versatile safety that I watched to this point. Very trustworthy option from the slot. Can play as a split zone safety. Can serve as a one-high guy. Can play in the box a little bit too. I think his ball skills are terrific. Timing, tracking, finishing ability. He makes some big-time plays on the ball. I think he's very good at anticipating routes, especially for a guy that's still relatively new to being a defensive back. I think he's a guy that is best in coverage, but don't get it twisted. He's more than willing to be physical, playoff contact, and tackle. I think he's a very authoritative finisher. You know, he brings it. He brings some pop behind his pads when he's looking to tackle. And for a guy that has that strong athletic profile, I think that functional athleticism shows up on tape. He's a guy that he's an urgent player with a hot motor. There's a very likable play demeanor about him. I'm a big fan of Dadrion Taylor-Demerson. So what concerns are there about forecasting him to the Buffalo Bills? I think you wish maybe he was a little taller, maybe had a little bit more length, right? Just kind of poking holes here. That's, 5'10" with sub 31-inch arms. Maybe you wish he was 6 foot with 31.5-inch arms. I think he can play a little bit tall. And so he's got a bit of a squatty build, but whenever he's playing tall and his hips aren't leveraged, I think that takes away from his ability to change directions and really be quick in and out of those transitions when he has to flip his hips and drive on the ball or drive on a route. And then he's a guy that's not immune to a missed tackle, but I think what's likable about that is it's not really a technique thing. It's just sometimes he's over aggressive. So really, really likable football player, very versatile, instinctive, physical ball skills, checks a lot of boxes. So firm second round grade for me. One of my top 3 safeties in this class. I'd be very surprised if he wasn't one of my top 3 guys. So those are my 3 favorites that I've watched to this point. There's 2 more that I want to get to on the other side of it. Jaden Hicks out of Washington State, Cole Bishop out of Utah. They're good-looking prospects, but maybe not exactly the boxes that they check are the most appealing for me when projecting them to the Buffalo Bills. I'm going to get into them here in just a moment, so be sure to stick with me. This episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Have you ever considered what you would do if you had an extra hour in your day? Would you exercise, read, spend some time with a loved one, maybe catch up on some sleep? A lot of us spend our lives wishing we had more time. The question is, time for what? If time was unlimited, how would you use it? The best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and make it a priority. Therapy can help you find out what matters most to you so you can do more of it. It's helpful for learning positive coping skills and how to set boundaries. It empowers you to be the best version of yourself. It's not just for people who have experienced major trauma. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you do is fill out a brief questionnaire. That'll get you matched with a licensed therapist. You can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, folks, 2 more safeties to get to, and you might see other draft guys like these players a lot more than I do. And in a vacuum, meaning I'm not scouting for a team, I probably have these guys a little bit higher. But because I'm looking at this through the lens of the Buffalo Bills, these skill sets are not as attractive to me. Good football players, not the skill sets that I personally would be targeting for the Buffalo Bills. I hope that you hear that very clearly. I am looking at players and scouting them through the lens of the Buffalo Bills and what I think they need. I like these 2 players, not exactly what I think the Buffalo Bills need. So let's dive into it. Jaden Hicks, safety out of Washington State. 6'2", 211 pounds, 31.5-inch arms, 9 3/8 on the hand size, really good RAS score of a 9.29. Last 2 years as a starter, 8 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks, 3 interceptions, 10 pass breakups, a forced fumble, and a fumble recovery. So we'll start with the good. Why should the Bills consider drafting this player? Well, he's got size and athleticism, and I think that athleticism is more linear, but he's big and explosive. There's no doubt about it. I think he showcases some very impressive moments of physicality and willingness to fill and run downhill from depth and play in the box, like super physical guy. I think he's at his best serving as a low safety when he gets a chance to be like a +1 defender in the box. So if you want to play one high, this is not the guy you would play as the one high. This would be the low safety that you want to play closer to the line of scrimmage. And while I don't think he's the best in coverage, he's got some really flashy ball production that stands out to me. He's made some really nice plays in the ball. He got Michael Penix out of Washington. That was a really good-looking interception. I think the ball kind of stuck to him more than anything, but the way that he was able to finish that play really stood out to me. That's what I like about Jaden Hicks. Size, athleticism, physicality, play him as a low safety. What concerns are there about forecasting Jaden Hicks to the Buffalo Bills? I would say that he's more of a reactive player than an instinctive player. You talk about this Bills defense, it's about playing with vision. I don't know that that's a strength for Jaden Hicks. In fact, when I watched him play, I thought more often than not, he seemed a little bit unsure to me. And I want guys that are confident, that are playing fast. I don't get that vibe when I watch Jaden Hicks. I think transitional quickness is a bit of an issue. Changing directions can be clunky. I think he lacks versatility. I don't love him in man coverage. I don't love him in deep zones. Those aren't strengths of his. I think he's better as a low safety or, very modest kind of split zone safety. And so that piece of his skill set is not what I think the Bills need to be gravitating towards. I think they need guys that can play in coverage. And for a bigger safety, I mean, this guy's 211 pounds. And he certainly has moments of big-time physicality. I still wish he was a more assertive hunter of the football. I wish he was better at playing off contact for a guy that's a bigger, like 211 pounds. And then I think the tackling inconsistency pops on tape. So whether it's breaking down in space and not getting himself squared up, or, sometimes just falling off contact, I want those things to be better for a bigger safety. So good football player, but through the lens of the Bills, wouldn't be where I would go. I want a guy that can play in coverage. And I didn't get the warm fuzzies with Jaden Hicks. I know some people love him. Would not be my preferred choice. Cole Bishop's the last safety I want to cover on this episode. Safety out of Utah. 6'2", 206 pounds, 29 3/4 inch arms, 9.5 on the hand size. Has an RAS score of a 9.88, but there's a big asterisk with that. He didn't do any of the agilities. So good size, good explosiveness linearly, but he didn't do a short shuttle and a 3-cone, and I'm pretty sure there's a reason for that. That's where that number would not be as strong. 3 seasons as a starter for Utah, 21.5 tackles for loss, 7.5 sacks, 3 interceptions, 12 pass breakups, forced fumble, and 4 fumble recoveries. So why should the Bills consider drafting Cole Bishop? Well, I mean, he's at his best in the box, triggering, playing downhill, being physical, like super physical all the time. Plays with unrelenting effort. A guy that, from a special teams perspective, I think this guy will probably be awesome. He tackles with intent, very physical. He's a really strong blitzer and gap shooter. Times it up well, and then he's got that burst, and he's physical. So timing, burst, and physicality is going to help you be a good blitzer. Plays off contact, sifts through traffic extremely well. I think that short area quickness really shows up on tape, and I think there's a lot of appeal with him playing man-to-man coverage on tight ends. I think those are all clear strengths of his game. Now, what concerns are there about forecasting him to the Bills? I think he's guilty of being over-aggressive, and that leads to some missed tackles. That leads to a lack of discipline with some of his zone coverage responsibilities. I love the playmaker mindset, but you can't do that in a way that you're not doing your job on defense and teams are able to make plays against you. You could tell that Utah was not overly eager to play him in deeper alignments. They wanted him down low, like as much as possible. I mean, there were times where I thought I was watching a linebacker. not as much of a safety. I think his back pedal, his transitions are stiff. Again, his athleticism is straight line, linear explosiveness. And then he does lack length. I mean, he's got sub 30-inch arms. And I think that shows up not only with his tackle radius, but, just how much length he has to invade the catch point. So I like him. Wouldn't be the skill set that I'd be gravitating towards for the Buffalo Bills. Now, if they want to play more 3 safety stuff, I would say there's a big caveat with both Jaden Hicks and Cole Bishop. If they wanted to be more of a 3 safety team, these guys would be good fits, right? Because I think that's kind of the skill set that would be best, introduced to what they already have in Taylor, Rapp, and Mike Edwards. But in my mindset of, hey, you need more coverage impact, I gravitate much more towards Nubin and Bullard and DTD out of Texas Tech. I gravitate less towards Jaden Hicks and Cole Bishop. But again, if you want that third safety to be part of your scheme more, well, all right. Here, I understand it with Hicks and Bishop. So I think it's a very important distinction for us to make here as I discuss these safeties today. All right, folks, thanks for being here. Very excited for kind of what we got cooked up for the rest of the week. I want to have a James Cook discussion tomorrow. Had a great question that was asked to me that I want to make an entire episode out of. That's my plan for tomorrow. Of course, herd mentality this week. I want to get to more receivers for sure. I want to tell you how I feel about Xavier Leggett. That'll be coming up this week. And of course, we got other positions to get to as well. So plenty of content coming your way. Don't miss anything. Make sure that you're subscribed. Would love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills. And I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.